All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And we want to welcome you to today's webinar, which is Grow Your Own ECE Supporting and Nurturing Talents. Next slide, please. Thank you. So my name is Elizabeth Pufall Jones. I'm the Director of Preparation and Work Environment Programs at the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment at the University of California, Berkeley. We're also a core partner of the National Early Care and Education Workforce Center. The National ECE Workforce Center is a collaborative effort involving 5 partner organizations. It also involves ECE educators, federal agencies, and other advisory groups. Our goal is to fundamentally improve career advancement, pay, and workforce policies in ECE to better reflect the valuable skills our workforce brings to our communities. We recognize that improving the conditions for educators requires a multifaceted approach. There is no one size fits all. There is no single ingredient to the solution. Our strategy is built around 5 interwoven policy areas that include compensation and financial relief, qualifications and educational support, workforce data, financial resources, and work environment standards. Our efforts engage an iterative research to practice approach where technical assistance, leadership coordination and partnership, research, and knowledge development both inform and are informed by each other. This ensures that everything we do is grounded in evidence, practice, and thus is directly applicable in real world settings. Go ahead. Thank you. So the National ECE Workforce Center is funded by the Administration for Children and Families and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Although the center is a part of ACF's broader efforts, we want to make it clear that the work of the center is its own and not necessarily representative of ACF. And on behalf of the center, we thank the federal agencies that are supporting the center's work: PDG B5, Office of Head Start, Office of Child Care, the Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation. Next, thanks. So the center officially launched the Grow Your Own campaign on April 10th, and the effort has included 3 videos highlighting different Grow Your Own strategies, a set of resources, and 4 webinars, all designed to increase awareness of Grow Your Own approaches in the context of early care and education. Although our field is not familiar with the term Grow Your Own, the approaches and strategies have a long history in ECE. Grow Your Own is an umbrella term that describes equity-centered, community-driven, holistic approaches designed to help communities support, strengthen, and sustain well-qualified, experienced, and diverse ECE workforce. Grow Your Own does this by nurturing the talents that already exist and by removing barriers to entering and staying in the field. So when we think about the concept of Grow Your Own, that is highly local strategies to recruit and retain diverse early educators within communities. We could start to list many examples of Grow Your Own that have operated under various names over the years. This campaign celebrates community, creativity, and expertise to cultivate talent and remove obstacles that prevent individuals from entering and remaining in the ECE workforce. In the first 3 webinars of this series, we introduced you to a few people who are leading and participating in Grow Your Own efforts. We heard from Jada Vargas, the millionth recipient of the CDA, talk about her experience in her high school dual enrollment program and her aspirations to become an early educator and to continue to be a role model in her community. Joanna Herrera, a former family childcare owner and provider, described the important work she is a part of through SEIU's educator-led community of care, which is designed to improve the working conditions for family childcare educators through training, advocacy, and peer support. Randy Wolf, executive director of ECEPS, an intermediary and sponsor um, uh, of apprenticeships, described the tremendous opportunity apprenticeship offers to prepare and train early educators. And I can go on, but we invite you to visit the National ECE Workforce Center website to access webinar recordings and to watch videos featuring Damaris Alvarado Rodriguez and Leanne Corville, North Seattle College, the YMCA of the East Bay, and Navajo Technical University. These Grow Your Own initiatives demonstrate the diversity and multitude of strategies that fall under this umbrella term. This campaign is a testament to the collective efforts and strategies developed at the community level to strengthen the workforce and enhance outcomes for children and families. Next, thanks. So today we will close out the campaign with this final webinar of the Grow Your Own campaign series with a focus on supporting and nurturing talent. When we talk about the early care and education workforce, one of the first things that comes to mind is commitment. Early educators have demonstrated a remarkable commitment to the field. They've also demonstrated resilience and adaptability in the face of unprecedented challenges like the pandemic and barriers to entry and staying in the field, like low wages, limited benefits, challenging work environments, limited career advancement opportunities, and high costs of education and training. If we don't address these barriers, we'll be taking advantage of this commitment and we'll lose out on a wealth of talent and expertise that could be transformative for young children and families and our communities. Through Grow Your Own, communities can provide comprehensive supports like structured, culturally responsive pathways to help individuals reach their educational career goals. Opportunities for hands-on work experience while receiving compensation and benefits. Wraparound supports so participants can complete the program successfully. Financial incentives like stipends and wage increases, and opportunities to advance their careers, assume leadership roles if desired, and progressively increase their compensation. So that regardless of where someone starts in high school, after a career change, immigrating to this country, or after years of experience as an early educator with a higher ed degree, multiple degrees, or no degrees, there's an accessible pathway to a good career in early education and care. Now, about you. Today, we are joined by a wonderfully geographically diverse group of participants. Whether you're joining from the United States, sovereign nations within the United States and US territories, or from overseas, your perspectives are important to us. Thank you for being here today and sharing your perspectives with us. We also learned from the registration questionnaire that there are many roles represented today, from systems leaders at various levels to childcare providers in various settings, funders, advocates, higher ed staff, TA providers, and policymakers. Your unique perspectives will help to enrich the conversation, so thank you for being here. And we see about 6% of you all are implementing a grow your own strategy. If you are in that 6%, give a shout out in the chat and tell us your name, the name of your program, and where you're joining from. We also learned that about a quarter of you have joined us in previous Grow Your Own webinars, so thank you for coming back. And whatever your knowledge level is of Grow Your Own, we're excited to be here with you and learn together. So we've been collecting your questions through registration and through the post-webinar surveys, and we appreciate the many questions that you've shared with us. The ones you see here focused on supporting the early care and education workforce will be addressed by today's panelists. Other questions submitted include questions specific to apprenticeship, what is the evidence base, how to get started, and who to contact. Questions about community partnerships for Grow Your Own, who is involved, and examples of effective ones. And many of you had questions about how Grow Your Own initiatives are raising wages and compensation. So Thelma is sharing links to resources available on the National ECE Workforce Center website that address these questions. And I would also say that we are collecting the questions for that iterative process of TA influencing and being influenced by research. So before I pass the baton to today's panel moderator, I want to encourage you to use the chat to ask questions and share resources. Please use the chat to share resources and connect with participants. But if you have a question for a panelist or all of the panelists, please use the Q&A button to share those. Today we have an incredibly dynamic panel that will be moderated by Amaya Garcia, who will introduce herself and get the conversation started. Thank you. Grab your popcorn and enjoy.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. I'm very excited to be here today and to learn from our wonderful panelists. I'm Amaya Garcia. I am Director of Pre-K-12 Research and Practice in the Education Policy Program at New America, which is a public policy and research organization in Washington, D.C. I have spent the past 8 years researching and writing about Grow Your Own programs across the country. Some of that work has played out in different kinds of ways. So I have created a 50-state scan to assess the landscape of policies and programs that support Grow Your Own across the country. And I have updated that regularly. So I first did it in 2020, and I'm releasing new results this summer. We run a Grow Your Own Educator National Network, which is essentially a professional learning community that works directly with Grow Your Own programs across the country, including some programs that are focused on ECE educators. We developed a toolkit for programs. I think that came out in October of 2022 that has a lot of different kinds of resources to get you started in the development of one of these programs, including how you recruit candidates, forming partnerships, and how you might evaluate some of your work. And more recently, New America has been involved with the Department of Labor funded intermediary for K-12 teacher apprenticeships. So that means that we've gotten to play a stronger role in making sure that these apprenticeship programs are high quality and are being implemented equitably across the nation. So I'm just going to pass it on to Kelly, who's going to introduce herself, and then she'll pass it on to the next panelist. And then after introductions, we'll get started on the conversation.
All right, thanks, Amaya. Hi, my name is Kelly Kazeck, and I am the Early Childhood Workforce Collaboration Specialist, currently working out of the Department of Education in Minnesota in our Learning Services Division. I'm soon going to be transferring to our Department of Children, Youth, and Families, which I'm really excited about. I've been fortunate to have spent the last few years working across multiple state agencies on our preschool development grant. And through that work, I've had the opportunity to be involved in different capacities in many of the workforce initiatives Minnesota is supporting, including the Grow Your Own Early Childhood and Family Education grants that I manage right now. Our Grow Your Own Early Childhood grants are just one of the strategies that we're using to build our early childhood workforce. Our approach has really been to try to open up as many doors as possible. We know people are coming into this field from many different places and with different knowledge and background and experiences and abilities, and we really want to value and recognize what they bring to the table. We don't just want to get people in the door though. We want to keep them in, and we want to keep in the folks that we already have. And so we know that requires supporting educators as they journey through that door and beyond. And we also know that programs are different, and our programs have different qualifications and different needs. And so, like Elizabeth said, we know that supports the one size does not fit all. So what we've been doing is really putting together a variety of programs to try to really reach people where they're at. And we've done a lot of work around developing recruitment programs. We have our new Empower to Educate program that provides personal support. We have local workforce advisors who help guide people on their path to becoming an educator. They offer financial support, training, job placement, mentorship. We're really targeting people who are just really kind of thinking about this as a career. We are also targeting young people through the work we're doing to help our high schools offer the Child Development Associate credential in their family and consumer science courses. So we're doing that work around that too. We have different program supports like the Wayfinder program that offers local navigators to help people with opening or expanding licensed family and center-based childcare programs. The navigators do things like help people understand licensing rules. They help them find training. They direct them to resources like grants for startup costs. They're kind of a one-stop shop for startup supports. And then we're providing educational supports through a variety of grow your own type programs. Like we have teach apprenticeship programs, the dual training pipeline, and then our new early childhood educator grants. And these programs don't only just provide tuition support, so participants don't have to take on debt, but they also provide wraparound supports that we know help people succeed, which is really especially important as we know many of the participants need to be working while they pursue their education. And then meanwhile, over here, work is happening on standards alignment, wage scales, comparable competencies, credit for prior learning. We're trying to work on as many barriers as we can at the same time, because we know, I just like to say, there's no chicken, there's no egg, there's just people and families and children who need support. So that's kind of what we're doing in Minnesota. And I will pass it on to Binal.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. My name is Binal Patel. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Neighborhood Villages. Before Neighborhood Villages, I was actually an educator myself. I taught preschool for many years and then sort of fell into the role of director. I was the most experienced and qualified. I had taken the course and met the requirements, and we had a turnover suddenly and fell into the role. And this is actually the story of a lot of leaders in the field, especially after COVID. And so I really feel like I ground the work that I do now as Chief Program Officer in that experience as an educator, as a leader. And it's also the way that we ground our work at Neighborhood Villages, which is really listening to the providers and the educators to inform where the gaps are, where the needs are, and to build programs. So Neighborhood Villages is a nonprofit based in Massachusetts. And we're a systems change organization, really trying to identify the gaps that exist and work towards a true childcare system. And we do this in partnership and with guidance from educators and providers. So we have something that we call the Neighborhood, which is our test kitchen, or our innovation lab, as we say. And this is a partnership with 5 local Boston-based early childhood programs where we model what a district or an early childcare system could actually look like, because there is a lack of one. So this includes funding positions such as an operations manager, a family navigator. We are adding in mental health supports, teaching and learning and instruction, and workforce navigation and pathways. And I know we're going to be talking more about these pieces in some of the further questions, so I won't get too much into detail. But essentially, the neighborhood is where we're able to identify through communities of practice with educators what the gaps are, where these needs are, what a system could look like. We pilot these programs, we iterate with the providers, and then we bring to scale with government. That's really our model. Some examples of previous programs that we've piloted through this is actually COVID testing. This was a need that our partners in the neighborhood brought up, that their fellow K-12 educators had access to, and our early childhood educators did not in Massachusetts. And so we piloted what it would look like to bring COVID testing to these programs, and then it had an opportunity to scale with government. We have a new pilot, again, based on the needs that the educators are bringing to us in terms of an early relational health support, both for children and for educators in training. With the increase in behavioral health needs since COVID, we'll be piloting that new program in our neighborhood. And we have now brought to scale, in partnership with government, various workforce pathways programs, including registered apprenticeships, which I will certainly be talking about more. But we have 2 tracks that we launched in 2023, a CDA track for new teachers and a director track for aspiring leaders in the field. We had 68 graduates this year from our registered apprenticeship program, and just launched our second cohort in February of 100 registered apprentices in these 2 tracks. In terms of Grow Your Own, all our programs are educator-focused, educator-centered, and follow this pilot, scale, iterate model, where we're always piloting and iterating with providers and educators. I will pass the introduction now over to Jennifer.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Jennifer De La Hara. I'm the Workforce Development Director here at the Charlotte Bilingual Preschool in Charlotte, North Carolina. My career has spanned over the past 20 years or so, really focused in 2 areas, education, and that's K-12 and early childhood, and also immigrant integration efforts. And so this has been a great place for me to be, to sort of combine my experience in both of those roles. Here at the Charlotte Bilingual Preschool, we are a 5-star licensed dual language program. That is our core business, of course, is the actual preschool. We serve about 185 students at 3 different sites in both 3- and 4-year-old programs. We also I like to call ourselves a trusted community center. So more than just the preschool instruction that is going on, a lot of people pass through our halls for various reasons, because they know they can show up, they can speak in Spanish, they're going to be greeted, and welcomed. And I point that out because that's important as it relates to my work, because there are multiple ways that we sort of recruit participants to enter our workforce development program. So we also have a thriving family program here at the Charlotte Bilingual Preschool, and then the workforce development, of which I'm the director of that program. So through the access to our parents, through the access of the various people in the community that are passing through our doors, we show up in spaces across the county, the city, to represent. We talk about what we're doing and introduce early childhood education as a possible career path, and bring folks into the fold. We've done that with about 185 different individuals to date, and that's really exciting. And we're continuing to think about new ways that we can recruit. Breaking down some initial barriers was a really big opportunity for us. And we'll be talking more about that, I think, later on. But I think, one of the things that was a real entry point, that was a game changer, was working with our local community college to offer the introductory ECE course, one in Spanish, but also we secured it to be completely free, so that there was no cost barrier as well. And so that has given folks an opportunity to be introduced, and we continue to follow back up because many of them continue to go and get a certificate or go on to get a degree. Some choose not to for whatever reason. So I think it's key and to think about, you know, how we can track data to find out why folks are choosing to enter the profession or what obstacles still may be there that's preventing them from wanting to continue. And certainly we want to support them in every way that we can. I will also mention that we do have an apprentice NC certified apprenticeship program that we run, and that has been very beneficial for multiple reasons to be able to provide, you know, hands-on instruction, real time. Our apprentices are working in the classroom beside our lead teachers, getting hands-on experience. And that's coupled not only with what's known as on-the-job training hours, but also professional development and specific course content throughout the year. And that has been a really effective way for us to give a year of experience throughout the year. And we're hoping to, of course, set ourselves up to have them become assistant teachers or lead teachers in the following year. So I look forward to sharing a little bit more about that, and so happy to be with you all today.
Thanks so much, everyone. We're going to get started with the question that's the topic of today's discussion. And I'd like you all to share what the ways are that Grow Your Own can help support and nurture talent within the ECE workforce. So we saw the slide earlier that's laid out sort of these essential elements that we think about when we talk about Grow Your Own. So structured and culturally responsive pathways, paid work experience, wraparound support, financial incentives, particularly compensation, which we know is such a huge issue in the ECE workforce, and career advancement. Is there someone who'd like to get us started thinking through about the ways that you're leveraging some of these elements within your own work? All right, Binal, I'm going to go with you then.
Sure, I was going to just volunteer. Great. And I'm really excited, especially to talk about supporting and nurturing talent. And I think, Kelly, you had brought this up in your introduction. It's really, really important. The recruitment piece is really important, but that retention piece is really important, because what we're seeing, especially since COVID, is a lot of people coming into the field and coming right out because of burnout, because of low pay. And so really this idea of nurturing the wraparound supports, the career advancement, we feel is super important and foundational to retain the talent we have in the field right now. And so there's a couple of ways that we're doing that at Neighborhood Villages. We really feel it's important to start with the foundational support upon entry with brand new teachers. And so the registered apprenticeship model is a really good model for this. And it's a little bit more of the traditional approach of registered apprenticeships as a recruitment strategy. So our first registered apprenticeship is a CDA apprenticeship, which aligns with our state credential, where we're supporting educators either brand new to the field or relatively new with about less than a year of experience coming in, getting that training. But the really important piece is that mentorship piece. And as a former director, I'll say that this is something, when you bring a brand new teacher in, that directors just don't have the capacity to support on their own. The director wears about 1,000 different hats every single day and just does not have the capacity, or sometimes even the skill set, to be that mentor, to be that coach for the brand new educator. And so this idea of having the related technical instruction, which is required to advance in your career, but paired with a mentor that's really assessing the competencies that are achieved for that brand new educator, we feel is really successfully leading to less burnout, is really giving that apprentice an opportunity to have a mentor to ask the questions to work through the challenges and problems with. And then that, coupled with the wage bumps, is really, really been a successful strategy in retention. And there was a study I recently heard about where 2 different groups were given the option of either getting a wage increase after a full completion of the program at 12 months or wage increases along the way. And almost the entire group chose the wage increases along the way. And it really is, again, that retention strategy where you see that increase upon the completion of a certain amount of hours or achievement of competencies. So registered apprenticeships is certainly the first approach that we're taking towards that. And then in terms of career advancement, we've created sort of stackable pathways with apprenticeships. So we have a director apprenticeship, which is actually pretty unique, and it's sort of non-traditional in the way registered apprenticeships are used. But we found that actually a lot of our CDA apprentices that became lead teachers went right into that director apprentice program. They felt like this was an opportunity to continue to grow their career in the field. They were committed at this point to staying. They felt supported and mentored in doing that. We've also found that we have a lot of current directors in our director apprenticeships. We have a lot of directors who had the story that I did, where they fell into the role and don't actually feel prepared. And so again, this idea of being paired with a mentor that can support you in achieving competencies and getting wage bumps along the way has been really successful in terms of a retention strategy. And then finally, I'll just say the idea of wraparound support and removing barriers in every program is something that is at the forefront, and we're thinking about multilingual pathways. So our program is offered in English and Spanish, but also we had an educator who needed ASL services, and whatever those barriers are, we really commit to removing those. Technology supports and technology access is really crucial with everything being on Zoom now, and it's not something that can just be overlooked or assumed for the educators that we have.
I can chime in next if you like. Similar to what Binal spoke about, I think our apprenticeship programs are very similar. It's very key having the increase in pay, although we've been doing it at the end of the apprenticeship as they move into the next position. So you've now given me a new idea to think about. So thank you about increasing it incrementally along the way. Low wages continue to be a major concern, I'm sure, for us nationwide. One thing I do want to mention that we've set up with our apprenticeship program to start off the year, the school year, with their new teacher mentor is we created this year sort of we call it a contract. It's really more of a memorandum of understanding between the teacher mentor and the apprentice, so that they really start off the year with a very clear understanding of what the roles and responsibilities are, and can, have that conversation going into it so that there's a real expectation. So we did a whole activity around actually having each of them read the other's roles and responsibilities and then speaking it back to them to make sure to check for clarification, and even what we called a kinship activity to bring them together and sort of paint a vision that's in their classroom now of how they we're going to foresee the relationship of working together in the classroom. And so that was really exciting because it was sort of to memorialize this is our intention for the year. So that was a really, I thought, effective, just small strategy to set it off on the right path at the beginning of the year. And then, of course, we do professional development opportunities throughout the year, and tied with that is assessment of how it's going, and then go back and make changes to our program based off of that feedback from both the mentor teacher and the apprentice. And ultimately here at the end of the year, we will update our competencies based on how the feedback that we're getting as well, to make sure, and also with changes that may be coming down, suggested changes from the Department of Labor. So I think that having that built into whatever the program is helps them feel supported, because they're part of that process of shaping it for the future as well for retention. And then I think the other thing I just want to mention when we're thinking about like wraparound supports, we're working primarily with immigrants who are coming to us with various degrees of English ability, lived experiences in their home countries, many of them with, degrees even in education. And I think maybe I'll mention that a little bit later as well. And there's also various degrees of digital literacy. So when we're talking about providing support, we're also sometimes, not always, but sometimes talking about even navigating from a real digital literacy standpoint, because if they're taking courses at our local community college, there's a lot of navigation to, get your student ID, fill out your residency paperwork, fill out FAFSA, navigate the online learning platforms that the community college uses. And so that is where we really come in to provide those wraparound services for those that need it, and differentiate, help support them along the way.
And I would add that I think that differentiation is really key. And that was part of what we took into consideration when we were developing our Grow Your Own grants for early childhood educators. And so when we set them up, we wanted those to be able to be as flexible as they could be in the supports that they offered. Because just like everybody said, we know that different people have different needs. You know, some people might need more language support, some people might need more technology supports, that sorts of things. And we also wanted to make it as open as possible, as broadly as we could across the field. Typically in Minnesota, our Grow Your Own grants have been focused on our school-based programs, which did include early childhood people, but those people had to be working on a teacher licensure track, and there weren't any other options. And so our new Grow Your Own early childhood grants are open to licensed programs, Head Starts, higher education, community-based programs, as well as school-based programs. But they can also be working on different degrees and credentials. They could be doing CDAs, they can be doing AAs, they can be doing BAs. And so we also wanted to keep those wraparound supports as open as possible. And I think one of the things that makes the Grow Your Own programs so unique, and I think you both have touched on this too, is just that we're able to support people that organizations have already built a relationship with, right? Like, and so then there's really a trust piece that's already been put into place, a trust from the organization that the candidate is a good participant, and that you know them and you know what their needs are, but also from that candidate to be able to share those needs. And that can be a vulnerable thing, to be able to talk about what you really need for support to be able to be successful. And so I really think that's a really unique piece of having Grow Your Own programs for early childhood educators. So
Thanks so much. I think everything that you said was really on point, particularly this issue of individualized support. Someone I spoke with once described it as a bird by bird approach, right? You're looking at every individual candidate, you're thinking about what they need, and you're designing those services around them, which is not how we traditionally prepare teachers and not traditionally how we support them through earning any kind of credential. And so I think that's really important. Now that we kind of set the foundation for some of the work that you all are doing and what is included in your programs, we're going to take a step back and actually think about how you began on this journey. Once you saw a pathway forward with Grow Your Own, how did you get started? And who was that first call to? Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I've only been with the Charlotte Bilingual Preschool for 1 year, and this program got started about 3 years ago. It's my understanding that my predecessor had found out that Wake County Technical Community College, which is in Raleigh, our capital, had been teaching some of the ECE coursework in Spanish. And so we contacted Central Piedmont Community College, which is our local community college here in Charlotte, and asked if they would do the same, consider doing the same. So they did. They recruited an instructor, and that was key for us. And of course, many of our folks are English speakers. Many of them do want to continue to improve their English. It's really for those that, are needing that first entry point and are going to feel more comfortable taking an academic level course, obviously in Spanish. And so that has been a huge game changer for us in the community. And that was really the first call, again, relying on those partnerships, the people that we're already in community with, and presenting the idea and having our local higher education partner, agree to invest in that as well. And so we have an ongoing relationship with them where we're, funneling students their way and continue to teach about 4 to 5 classes per semester in Spanish, and then continue to support our students also with their English language development. And certainly if they go on to pursue an associate's degree, for example, they're transitioning to taking academic classes in English. But I think that was the first call, and obviously the most important one to get it started.
I can chime in next. So I mentioned a little bit that our model is always to identify gaps from educators. So really our first call or our first step is to go right back to the educators and the providers to make sure that we're understanding the landscape of what the challenge is, of what they see as the needs of a program. And apprenticeships is an example. Another example is the toddler curriculum that we've just developed in partnership with educators. We want to make sure that we're understanding what the need is, what it is that the educators and the providers are looking for. And then I would say, similar to what Jennifer said, I really believe with the scarce resources we have that we can't duplicate efforts that already exist. So my first call is really to other partners that are in the field, that are perhaps doing the work, that have done the work, that are aware of work that exists. Because I want to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not doing something that somebody is already doing. If it doesn't need to be created, I'd rather partner with somebody that's doing it. And so our apprenticeship program, actually, we have a non-college pathway where we partner with a professional development organization that's providing the CDA training and is providing the leadership courses for our director apprenticeships. And then we can also talk with the college partners to look at the credit for prior learning that can be translated from the CDA or for some of the trainings that we offer. So we started by reaching out to partners in this work to see where we could, again, not duplicate efforts that are being made. And then also to learn, I think this call is such a good example of the network that exists within early childhood. And I know, really veteran members like Randy, for example, or other organizations that are doing this work across the country. And hopefully any of us can be your first call where you can reach out and really talk to people that have been doing the work and learn sort of where the next steps might be for your specific program.
And I would say in my situation, in Minnesota, we have, like I said, a grow your own grant in our school-based programs that's been very successful in diversifying the workforce. And so that was a starting place for me. And one of the things I did right away was volunteer to be a grant reviewer and started reviewing all kinds of grants that they were doing, which was really helpful. But also, with the feedback that we had from our preschool development grant engagement and from the things that we hear from the field, we knew that we needed something that, like I said, was more focused on the specific needs of our whole early childhood workforce, our whole field. I think a lot of times our school-based programs were getting a lot of funding and things streamed their way, and we were missing an opportunity to bring people into the field who were infant toddler educators, multilingual educators, and really working on the whole workforce. And I think we did have a chance to do a pilot grow your own with our preschool development grant money. And that was an opportunity to really learn, again, like I said, from the individuals, what their specific needs were, and like thinking about how to structure the program so that it was as flexible as it could be. I think the uniqueness too of what our Grow Your Own offers is we have a lot of supports that are very focused on the individual. People can get teach scholarships and things like that, and those are wonderful, but we kind of needed something that also created a kind of a system approach, and something that could be that could come from the organizations themselves. And I think that was a piece where we could really get recruitment from organizations, and they really knew their own people's individual needs, like I was saying before. We've really found that when programs are developing kind of a cohort model of learning, that's been extremely beneficial for participants. But I do think it gives organizations more flexibility to provide more tailored support and really have that ownership in what they're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks so much. What really stood out for me from everything that was shared was this idea of partnerships, utilizing what already exists, building on the strength within communities, and using that network really to your advantage. Kelly, you mentioned PDG funding and you mentioned the grants within Minnesota. And so a big part of the strategy is finding a way to fund it, right? And so we know that there's a lot of innovation that's possible, but we need money to do it from lots of different sources. And so I was just curious to learn a little bit more about the funding sources that you all initially used to get started with this work. Anyone can jump in first.
I'll go ahead. We function as a nonprofit daycare center. We do receive some government funding for the actual functions of the preschool, but for programs like mine, it's very heavily relied upon grant funding. And so in order to get that started as a pilot, the Charlotte Bilingual Preschool applied for a new school ventures grant for pilot funding to really fund the operational costs of someone like me, because someone's got to be here, you know, coordinating and all. And that's how it got started from the get-go. And we've, you know, continue, that was 3 years ago, to seek other, you know, local and sometimes national funders to continue supporting the operational side so that we can be here and be available to recruit new folks and help navigate them through the system, including the apprenticeship program. Some of the ARPA dollars that were passed through, I do want to mention this because I do think this is really important and something I'm going to continue to advocate for through the governor's office, and the North Carolina Business Committee for Education started a new initiative here in North Carolina that's known as Building Bright Futures, which is supporting specifically our early childhood care education apprenticeship program. And so we are receiving some extra funding. And I personally think that was one of the wisest decisions to spend down some of those pass-through ARPA dollars. And of course, we know that those are going away. And we're actively interested in, you know, helping the Building Bright Futures initiative continue its own search for future funding so that those funds can be passed through and we can be compensated also to continue. Because we've grown this year. We had 6 apprentices that started at the beginning of the year, and sort of in an effort to maximize those ARPA dollars, we brought on 4 more in January. So we're running an off-year cycle. We're going to do January till, you know, January of the next year, but that was in, you know, to take advantage. But that of course is a challenge. It would be great to have sustaining, you know, funds to plan it for in the future, but sometimes you have to take advantage of what's available in the short run, and that's what we've tried to do here at the Charlotte Bilingual Preschool.
I can go next. So for all of our programs, including apprenticeships, including the curriculum, including the early relational health pilot that we're doing, our first funding source is always philanthropy. And it's because we really are able to get that flexibility with philanthropy. We're able to pilot something, in the true word of pilot, and iterate it in partnership with educators to make those changes. When we first launched a registered apprenticeship program and I was putting the budget together, I mean, it's a program we hadn't done before. I'm really just sort of putting in placeholders for how much the training would cost, how much we can offer in terms of mentor stipends, how much the wraparound supports will cost. And then we're able to really pilot through the course of that first year and that first cohort what the actual cost is, so that when we go to scale with government, we're able to really create efficiencies in those fundings. And then also advocate for where sometimes there's gaps in funding with government. And a really good example for that is when we went to launch the registered apprenticeship program with our state government, one of the line items that is not an allowable expense is actually staffing costs for our organization to implement the program. But there would be no program if we didn't have staff, if we didn't have a program manager that was in charge of it, supporting the apprentices, helping them through the work process plans, working with the employers and getting their employer contracts and getting all the paperwork in place. And so because we were able to have that funding and recognize the need for that team through our philanthropy pilot, we're then able to advocate with government for what that flexibility is needed and what the different components of the program are needed and where there are funding gaps with government funding. So I'll say if there's any funders or philanthropy on this call, they're really a very important partner in early childhood, because we're able to pilot these programs and basically be the R&D before the programs are brought to scale. And for any government partners on the call, I really encourage flexible funding as much as possible. Restrictive funding is just very challenging as the landscape keeps changing and the needs keep changing. Flexible funding has been really, really impactful in creating successful programs for us.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's why we've had that success with our preschool development grant funding, because it has been able to be more flexible. And that when we were able to use that for those pilot grow your own grants, it really showed us just like what you're saying. And I think that really is a demonstration of how we all work together, right? Like you're able to learn what you can through the pilots that you offer and then elevate that to our government programs. And that's something that we did with our preschool development grant pilots, is we were able to show the need. We had more people that asked for funding than we could provide funding for. And then we were able to show how it was benefiting people. And fortunately, we have our children's cabinet, our governor's children's cabinet in Minnesota that works really directly with our preschool development grant team. And so, you know, that was able to be elevated to our legislators. And then we were able to, our legislation just passed this last funding year, $5 million for the biennium for our Grow Your Own Early Childhood grants. And then there's ongoing funding built into that. And so it's kind of that working up process that we have to do, and really sharing those stories and those specifics that I think is what really makes a difference.
And also, sorry, just to add one more point, because I saw someone mention it in the chat, multi-year funding, huge impact, because by the time you apply for the funding, get the funding, you're already thinking about the next cycle. And it's really just unsustainable, not just for the program, but in terms of a staffing model. And so flexible funding, but multi-year funding is really, really impactful.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's really important for sustainability. And when you have to function on sort of the legislative cycle, that can make it really hard. Kelly, I just wanted to follow up and push a little bit deeper into Minnesota, because in some of the work that I've done, I found kind of these big gaps and misalignment between grow your own strategies for K-12 teachers and grow your own strategies for ECE teachers. So it's quite notable that Minnesota has invested in two kinds of grow your own pathways. So I'm just wondering, you shared a little bit about sort of the PDG grant and what that pilot taught you, but what was the effort that went into getting them to kind of invest in this and to provide $5 million? It's something that does not exist from what I know in lots of other states. And so it's commendable, but why would you think that this became a priority for your state legislature?
I think part of that started when our preschool development grant was doing community engagement and really hearing from the people on the ground that we need more early childhood educators, and we need more early childhood educators that represent our communities. That was a big part of it. I think just the number, you know, we continue to lose family childcare programs. They're constantly hearing from the field that, you know, centers don't have enough staff. And I think we were able to show too that, you know, kind of like that, what we were talking about, those gaps, that, you know, although there's a wonderful grow your own grant program in Minnesota, how it was not meeting the needs of the whole early childhood workforce. And that it was, you know, really, when you look at the qualifications and the what people are required to have to enter in to be in the early childhood workforce. Teaching license in our state really only applies right now to one of our early childhood programs. Although, you know, you can have a teaching license and work in all these other programs, it's not needed. And I think that really trying to focus on that equity piece helps them to see that we need to provide supports across the field and not just in our programs that are school based. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, Jennifer, you wanted to add a sort of a contrasting perspective from North Carolina on this issue.
Yes, well, I've done some reading on the success in Minnesota, and so us down here in North Carolina are a little bit jealous of some of the great investments, public investments, not only in education, but of course in your very future, right, of your state. So congratulations to Minnesota on the K-12 and the early education forefronts. We are in a little bit different situation. Currently about 1% of our general fund in our state is allocated to early childhood education. And we have been stabilized with some of the federal funding that came through because of COVID. There's been a lot of advocacy going on to increase funding to help further stabilize this industry. So we'll see how that that advocacy continues to go. But it's really, even if we're able to accomplish that in the short run, it's really about the long-term vision for, do we want to, as a state, value early childhood education for our children as a profession, for our teachers, as a community builder. And so I'm certainly hopeful that we will move in that direction, but I am glad that I'm here listening to ideas about even what Kelly just said about listening to the community. And certainly I'm participating in that, and I'm watching our community come together in a whole new way to advocate, and we're hopeful that we can secure some longer term funding so that we can produce longer term changes, because we've had a lot of our child care centers closed down just even in this past year, and we're very fearful that maybe even up to 1/3 more of our state's child care centers may close. So there's a lot on the line, and I am here to collaborate with anyone who's on the call that wants to reach out and, collaborate with us together. It couldn't be more important. When they say it's a childcare crisis, it's not hyperbole. It's very, very real.
I think I would add on too, is it wasn't just, families, it was business as well. Business is sharing. We don't have the employees that we need. We don't have the employees we need that could, because they're struggling to find childcare. And so I think that, it all plays into the big picture of what I think helped get it funded.
Absolutely. And if I may add one more piece to that. So also our North Carolina Chamber of Commerce advocated for this last year as well, when they passed the biennium budget and extra monies were not allocated. Our local Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, which is our local Chamber of Commerce, also advocated. So they have been speaking out, and yet we've not seen the action. So they're going here in the short session, which typically financial allocations are not made during the short session in North Carolina, but they're going to try because it's that urgent. So the business community has been advocating for it because they realize the economic impact by not having workers. What I really think that they need to start thinking about their advocacy is because when I mentioned the 1% of the general fund that's available from the tax base of the revenue coming in, what's also happening is our taxes are decreasing, and the corporate tax rate is also going down to 0% in 2030. So even the general fund, the money that's available, and that 1% that's allocated, the pot of money is going to continue to go down. And so I really need the business community to understand that and to speak out about exactly how do they feel about that, because the available funds are also decreasing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. You're really highlighting such an important issue, and I'm hopeful too that we can have more federal investment in early childhood education and making sure that we have all the support needed to make sure that we sustain programs and keep them strong. So thinking through some of the systems that kind of govern the work, as you kind of all are alluding to, what are some of the local and state policies or infrastructure? So things like quality rating and improvement systems, workforce registries, et cetera, that have supported Grow Your Own efforts, if anything, in the work that you've done. And this is a time also to think about barriers too. So we've talked about, Jennifer, you're highlighting like the lack of funding, but what other kinds of barriers might exist within your local and state policies that have sort of hindered these efforts?
I can start with, in Massachusetts, we have, a teacher certification sort of pathway, and we're moving to a credential. And so it's been really wonderful to sort of align with the current pathway. I'd say a barrier or a challenge is to then shift to what will be sort of our new credential. And I know that some states are going through this process as well, where you're transitioning from something that was to something new. And so I mentioned this in one of my answers in the Q&A as well, where, you know, the CDA is really like a nationally aligned credential. And so we've built our program around that. But because registered apprenticeship sort of has these, you know, foundational structure elements to it, we can really adapt based on whatever the new credential is, but it feels a little bit like a moving target right now. So that's a bit of a challenge. And then also in Massachusetts, you know, we're very lucky that we're experiencing everything that you all are saying in terms of funding going down and really feeling the pinch. We sort of rode this high in COVID that now feels like it's coming down, unfortunately, but we do still have, our state legislature has been really supportive of debt-free pathways in terms of college courses, all the way to an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree in Massachusetts through a scholarship. And we have so many workforce programs. We're one of them that have been funded for educators, which has been really successful. What I'll say a challenge is that providers are often inundated with all the different options and pathways for their educators. And so really a challenge has been helping to navigate the employers and providers who are really, really busy doing the 1,000 other things that they're doing when they get a flyer that says your educator can get this degree for free, or apprenticeships are a good fit for you because da 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 da. It's a lot. It's really overwhelming for the providers. And so I think that is a challenge that we're trying to support, and is probably a challenge that resonates across other states as well, in terms of really helping in a strategic and aligned way, helping educators to advance in their pathways in a way that makes sense for that specific educator.
I think for us, some of our local policies that have been addressed or need to continue to be addressed are obviously language access and language justice. And that is where we, though, at the same time, market ourselves as being able to provide a niche service. And that's how we write our grants, you know, to the community, to say we're actually providing this level of service, because some of our partner institutions, just for whatever reason, are not able to do that. This plays out also specifically with scholarships and money available. And so we assist, and we also have Teach scholarships. So we're assisting some of our participants to apply for those. Many of our particular students, it's a challenge to fill out FAFSA, or they may choose not to. There's, you know, still lingering confusion around whether or not there's public charge, and I'm speaking about immigration policy at this point. So that those would be even national challenges that we need to address, because there's just, you know, some folks are fearful to seek out a scholarship because of what that may mean because of their immigration status. We have certain folks that are here on TPS, temporary protected status. They may have lived here, and there's certainly residents here in Mecklenburg County, but by default, they have to pay out-of-state tuition. So this is a challenge. So we're sort of scrambling. We have a pool of resources available for scholarships, but sometimes they don't quite cover enough. And so we've also reached out to our local workforce development board, who is getting funding. And I'm not sure if that's directly from the state or if that's federal workforce funding supports, but they've been helpful and providing some extra scholarship assistance, because again, we're talking about folks who are making, you know, $15 an hour. They're just not going to possibly be able to pay $3,000 a semester for out-of-state tuition, and a lot of that is linked to their current immigration status. So these are challenges both at the, you know, federal, state, and local level, where we're just sort of trying to fill in the gaps and provide that extra support to make sure that they can continue on in their studies.
I agree with all of this. And I think one of the things that I would add on to that is just, it goes back to that communication piece. And how do we help people navigate all these different programs that are out there? And there's just so capacity is an issue for people. And so when we learn strategies and things that are working, how are we sharing that within our networks and our communities? An example I can give is one of our original Grow Your Own pilot grantee participants was they were offering coursework with a bilingual faculty person, and they were able to provide textbooks in Spanish and English. And the feedback from their participants was that that was extremely helpful, but that they really also wanted to have coursework available in Spanish. And so our faculty were looking into how would they be able to do that without having to go through a whole curriculum review and all of that. And what they found out was that they were able to submit the course with their Spanish speaking faculty as a change in modality, rather than having to go through the whole curriculum process, which made the process for them really, really a lot faster. And so those courses are now going to be available this fall for people to attend and more Grow Your Own participants to be a part of. So sometimes it's little things, and we just have to try to figure out what other ways that we can, what workarounds there are, and then to make sure everybody knows about it, I think is part of it. Communication. It's a hard piece, but it's really important.
Thanks, Kelly. You gave a really good segue into the next question, which is really near and dear to my own heart. And that is that the ECE workforce has tremendous assets, as we know, including linguistic diversity. So tell us more about the language access supports offered to the educators in your programs, and what other considerations do we need to take into account when designing programs for multilingual educators?
I'm happy to start. So I absolutely agree. The multilingual capacity that we have is really such an asset in this field, and is really important when we're thinking about the mixed delivery system and what is the right fit for each child and each family. And it's not a one size fits all industry, and it absolutely shouldn't be. And so through our various workforce programs, and apprenticeships is one of them, we have made sure not just to provide, you were talking about, Kelly, being really important to provide the textbooks and the materials in different languages, but also the instruction, any communities of practices that are happening, the translation for that. We had in-person events, including an orientation and a graduation. And sometimes we're so used to Zoom and the flexibility of translators in Zoom, and it's just as important in those in-person events to have translation services available and all of the materials that are sent out to have translation. And so each and every component of the program, having that translation is important. We also have a college support team that connects educators to different college pathways and courses. And we found, a growing offering of multilingual courses, certainly not equal to the demand, but more than it used to be, particularly here in Spanish and Portuguese and Mandarin, but up to a certain point. So it's helping educators to sort of get through the door and maybe get that initial certificate. But then again, as we get sort of beyond that and towards advanced careers, it's really only English pathways. And so I think we need to continue to advocate for that and the importance of that, especially when we're talking about wage equity across these sort of BIPOC populations. That is a really important barrier that doesn't really allow them to reach that sort of wage equity and advancement that they need to. And then the last thing I'll say too, especially in the CDA pathway, we found that although we can find instructors that can offer the training, there's only certain languages then that once they get to the portfolio, the CDA observer, I think that the council has really worked hard to expand the language offerings, but there's just not a lot of capacity in the other languages. So how can we, as a field, really advocate for the need of CDA specialists that speak Portuguese and speak Mandarin and are able to look at the portfolio and the exam so that we don't get educators who have done all the training and then can't get to the finish line when it comes to the CDA.
That's something that we've been exploring with our adult basic education partners, because often our adult basic ed has an ability to, they have more access to more language and to be able to support people beyond, our Spanish and our Somali and our Hmong and things like that. So we've been talking about what kind of supports can we start building for people so that they get, kind of those before the CDA supports even, to help them with navigating systems, and having that language support along the way. So those are discussions we've been having, which I'm really excited to think about how that can build into this whole support process that we're working on.
And then I'll mention also, Amaya, I like the way that you framed it, talking about the assets that are brought. And certainly another way that we're supporting some of our workforce development participants is many of them are coming to us from Latin American countries with credentials, sometimes master's level degrees in education. And that's a whole other system to navigate, is the credentialing service, coming from the government to, so that they can have those translated, validated, and then credentialed, and sometimes even a BK, birth to kindergarten license issued because of so much education and so much talent. Now, we're fortunate for those that maybe don't speak as much English. We're a wonderful place for them to be, because in our dual language model, we have one lead Spanish teacher and one lead English teacher, and they go back and forth every other day. And so they really get an opportunity to practice their craft in their native language while they're also, learning English if that's what they're choosing to do. I will say on the other end of that, and this is a new initiative I'm really excited about. I mentioned we've had 185 people sort of come through our doors over the past 3 years, and we're not growing that fast to employ that many teachers. And so we're like, how can we work with our local community partners to, have some of our participants, work in other childcare provider settings. And for many of them, we know that they speak more English than maybe they believe that they do. And we want to give them an opportunity to practice and to build confidence. And so we worked locally here with our Smart Start of Mecklenburg County, which helps funnel through money from the state, from the North Carolina Partnership for Children, to develop a particular ESL course designed specifically for ECE. So we went and recruited a whole bunch of folks to attend that class. They're finishing up now. And in addition to the Saturday class where they're really practicing their English in for ECE environment, we're also pairing them together to go and work and do a practicum piece at an English dominant site. And that is to help, give them confidence that by having them go with a partner. And we also asked our partners, and of course they were more than happy to do this, but to be very thoughtful about where we're sending them so that they would also be welcomed. We were asking for a certain level of, cultural competency. And so as we're sending these folks out to have that practicum piece, that they're being well received. And so we'll see what the fruits of that labor come to be, but we're really hopeful that through that, we're able to send out folks, because we know the jobs are there, and to work in a multitude of settings, and have the right skill set to be able to do so. So that's a new initiative. It's piloting now, and we're hoping to start recruiting this summer for another fall class and to continue to do that as well.
That's great. Thanks so much. I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to try to merge a question we have in our guide with a Q&A question that was raised. So you all mentioned partnerships at the beginning of this. Partnerships are a really central part of any Grow Your Own program, across kind of any K-12 early ed. And these partners can include, the ECE programs themselves, higher education, funders, advocacy organizations, policymakers, school systems, etc. What is one thing you want to say to encourage these important and potential partners to support the ECE workforce through Grow Your Own? And relatedly, to message this idea, I'm thinking about this Q&A question about this idea that ECE jobs are not good jobs because they don't pay high wages, right? And so really thinking through how to message why Grow Your Own is an impactful strategy, but also why we need to be cultivating a really strong and dynamic workforce and sort of thinking through this idea of good jobs, right, in relation to some of this work, because we know that these are some of the most important roles someone can take. They develop children's minds and they provide essential supports to families. And so I'm just curious to see, like, what is one thing that you would say to encourage other partners to really think about this in a more dynamic way? Kelly, let's start with you.
Oh, I'm thinking about so many things. I think one of the things I think about is that, you know, without the partnerships, there's just missing pieces. And I think we learn so much more when when people are working in partnership. And I think it also paints that picture too of if it, you know, this is important work, and that's why we have all these partners that are interested in supporting it. I've been able to do some reading of our deed grants, our child care facility grants that our state is doing with our Department of Employment and Economic Development. And I was so amazed at how many of those grants had built in they're so community based, and they're pulling in so many different partners, and a lot of them have grow your own pieces in them as well. And I think there's just opportunity to tell a new story about the early childhood career, and we've been trying to do that in Minnesota. We have a new publication that I think you have a link to in your resources called Minnesota's Early Childhood Workforce, Making a Difference in the Early Years. And it's full of all kinds of information about how people can get into the field, the different opportunities that are in the field, that it's open to everybody, and there's so many supports there. We had 7 different people across our state that we interviewed, and there's video of that in the publication so that you can hear their story. And what you find from those stories is nobody says, you know, that I'm doing this job because I wanted to make a lot of money, obviously, right? We know that, but their passion and their energy and their, you know, how important they know their job is comes through in those interviews. And it's just wonderful to see and hear that. But I think those partnerships are that key piece to finding and knowing what those individual needs are and what those pieces are that are missing, so that when we're designing the programs, we're able to take that information and really weave it into what we're able to offer people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm happy to add to that too, and to the question you asked, Amaya, about how to really tell the story when the barrier and the pushback is that this is not a good job. And we recently released a report called The True Cost of Care. And, you know, often there's sort of cost of care or market studies done of how much, you know, tuition is versus how much salary is. And I think what we realized in releasing this report is even people who we thought of as allies and partners and advocates in the field were shocked and said, this is the first time that I realized that, you know, as a director, I'll say personally, I had this happen to me all the time. Every time a new board member would join my program, they would say, you pay your teachers what? Like they get paid minimum wage. I'm leaving my child with them. This is the most precious, important thing in my life. And they're making half of what I make. And yet my tuition is equal to my mortgage. Like, how is this possible? And I'd open my books and I'd show them. And it's really that the math doesn't work. The system created as a private sector doesn't work. It's a public good. And so in this true cost of care, we sort of go beyond what the market rate is to what the cost would be if we were really implementing high quality childcare system. And so that's not sort of the breadcrumbs that we have now of minimum wage and minimum professional development and burnout of teachers. It's the high quality implementation of curriculum. It's the behavioral health supports and the special education supports. It's the meals. It's that if you take all of that into consideration, parents could actually not afford the cost of care. And this is why it's important that we have public funding and government support to really have a childcare system. I'm happy to share the cost of care report. It's also on our website at Neighborhood Villages. But I think really we need to shift that story. And I think I heard one of you say it too, that it's not a wage issue or a salary issue that we have, it's a funding issue. And it's not that the cost of care is too high, it's that we don't have the right system to pay for the cost of care. And so we need to continue to change the language with which we talk about the sector.
Yeah, I'll agree and echo one of the things we've been working on with some community of practice and cohorts that I'm a member of is agreeing upon shared language. So that when we show up in space, we're sort of singing to the same tune in an effort to increase our advocacy efforts. And so bringing folks together to agree upon that shared language and then continually lifting that up in different spaces is really important. I've been to echo Binal's point of what I've heard just in the past 3 weeks at 2 different events is folks talking about it being a failed market initiative. And I feel like there's some efforts that wasn't me, but someone's been pushing that narrative. And that's actually really, really good and really true, because to her point, it's not, it doesn't work even in the free market. The model is not sustainable. And so it really does demand a public investment. And of course, we're very disjointed with having some that are for profit, some that are nonprofit like ours, some that rely almost entirely on government funding, you know, and a mixture of it. And so it's hard and it's complicated to get across. So I like the idea of shared language that hits the mark, even to the point that I almost exclusively now don't use the word funding, because for whatever reason, funding now has become this negative connotation. And I always say investment. And the reason that I use the word investment is because it evokes this sense of, thinking about our future. And it also answers the question when people say, well, what's the return on our investment? If you want to have a return on your investment, you actually have to have the I. It's part of the acronym. So, if people are like, what's the return on investment of that? Then it begs the question, well, what is our level of investment in education and our very future? So I think the more that we can continue to collaborate and lift up language that makes sense to, even our policymakers, then hopefully we'll be able to see some of the change that we need.
Thank you all so much for this engaging conversation. Now we're going to pass the mic back to Elizabeth to close us out.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Amaya, our moderator, for an incredible conversation. As we close the campaign, we invite you to continue to share your stories. Please use the hashtag #GrowYourOwnECE to highlight your Grow Your Own programs and why they matter. Read and share the center's informational briefs, resources with colleagues, friends, and community members to help them learn about the potential of Grow Your Own and the vital importance of the early care and education workforce. And spark discussion and talk about all the ways that communities are supporting and strengthening the early care and education workforce. So we are dropping the link to the center's Grow Your Own landing page so that you can find additional resources and links to all of the campaign materials there. In the coming days, we will be updating this page to include links to the slides that we shared today, a recording of this webinar, and resources that were shared in the chat by our speakers. And finally, and lastly, but definitely not least, please stay connected with us, emailing us with your questions, ideas, and stories, and visit our website and sign up for the newsletter. There's going to be so much more coming. We've collected so many interesting questions and ideas from all of our panelists and from you all that have participated, that we're going to keep growing our own. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.